Communicator Bronze, Advanced Leader Bronze, and Division D Governor Eric Schultz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sergeant at Arms. If I come out here, can all of you hear me? No. Thank you. Thank you for the honest response. Do you remember your first table topics? Yes? Do you remember being a guest at your first club meeting?
Yes.
Maybe boldly or hesitantly approaching the front of the room and being asked a question, responding to it. For many of us, that was our first experience. After that response, do you remember the applause? Yes. For most of us, that was the hook from our first experience that helped bring us back to Toastmasters. Several months ago, Toastmasters from across the district began competing in table topics contests. The winners of these club-level contests moved on to compete at the area and then at the division level. The 8 winners from the division contests are here today to compete for us at the district table topics contest. Toastmasters and honored guests, welcome to District 13 Table Topics Contest. I'm going to take a moment to go over some of the formal rules of the contest. Table Topics consists of a series of timed 1 to 2 minute responses to the same topic that will be judged by a panel of judges. The contestants and the judges have certified their eligibility. The contest chair and the chief judge have confirmed the eligibility of the contestants and the judges. These proceedings are designed to ensure that we run a fair contest and that each contestant is given a level playing field in which to compete. The following announcements I'm going to make are in the interest of having a distraction-free environment for our contestants. First, please place all cell phones or other devices that make noise into silent mode or off. Second, and many of us have cameras here, there will be no photography of contestants during the contest. There will be photo opportunities after the contest. Videotaping is allowed. You're up there doing that right now. Thank you. Once the contest has begun, members of the audience are asked to refrain from leaving or re-entering the room. If you must leave, please wait until a moment of silence while the judges are completing their ballots. In order to allow the judges time to mark their ballots, we will have 1 minute of silence after each contestant's speech. And then we will have silence after the last contestant's speech until all the ballots are collected. Timekeepers, will one of you signal me after each contestant when 1 minute has elapsed between contest speeches? Thank you. In your conference program is a list of table topics contestants. We just drew for order, and that order is: speaking first, Robert Viszneki. Speaking second, Brian Johnson. Speaking third, Joe McBride. Speaking fourth, Francine Milligan. Speaking fifth, Lori Breen. Speaking sixth, Sue Ellis. Speaking seventh, George Hayward. Speaking eighth, Dana Mitnik. Once we begin, the contestants will be escorted out of the room and brought back in one at a time. I do want to take a moment to let everyone know what the cause of the delay was in starting the contest was actually finding the holding area around back to keep the contestants, because this is a little maze-like here. So thank you for your indulgence with that. Each contestant will be introduced by the stairs. I will introduce their name. I will give them the topic. I will repeat the topic and introduce their name. We will greet them to the stage with applause, Once the applause subsides, they will begin. Once the contestants have finished speaking, they're going to remain at the room at the contestants' table near the front. Are there any questions? As contest chair, I declare that all the contestants have been briefed, all the contestants are present, and they're ready to proceed with the contest. Mr. Chief Judge, have all contest officials been briefed, and are we ready to proceed?
Mr. Chairman, everyone has been briefed. Let's have a contest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chief Judge. The first contestant will be microphoned, and the remaining contestants will be escorted by the Sergeant-at-Arms to our holding area. Please give us one moment. Viszneki. What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? Robert Viszneki.
And 3 years ago, Ida Ellis Bagby and William Bagby brought into this world Brenda Kathleen Bagby, a most beautiful little girl. The pictures of her, though black and white, showed she was the treasure of her parents' eyes. Why? 4 brothers had preceded her. Finally, had a daughter. And she grew up spindly thin. And just that farm girl quality of a plain dress and simple features about carrying buckets, being shown next to the cow, being in the farmyard. So this Brenda Kathleen Bagby would be considered ordinary by most individuals who would meet her. After all, there are plenty of young girls in this world. As she got older, she was unique in her family as she left the farm. And she went to a little town in Virginia, Lynchburg, Virginia. Some of you might know it. Liberty University, Jerry Falwell, and the moral majority. But here's this woman now, a young woman, still worried though, because she's a farmer's daughter. Lo and behold, here comes this Yam Yankee down from Pittsburgh, and he finds her at a gathering of women. He and his buddies, hey, there's 6 girls in this dorm room. And so, I want to say that when she came and introduced herself to me, I will say that the most beautiful is my wife in her wedding outfit, which I miss, as she is now resting in peace. Thank you.
Brian Johnson. What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? Brian Johnson.
One of the most beautiful things is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. She's here with me now. It's my wife. The day we got married, and I stood at the end of the church in the aisle, and everybody stood up and turned around and looked back at her, and she came down the aisle. She was and is the most beautiful thing in the world. The day I met her, I was working at PNC Bank in the mailroom. and I was registering mail. And this woman comes to the mailroom window, and she has these beautiful doe eyes that stop me in my tracks. And I tried not to look at her. You ever see that happen with young kids? I'm trying not to look at her. I don't want her to see that I am captivated already. She walks away, and I say to one of the guys in the mailroom, "Who is that? Who is she?" I think her name is Pat. I'm not quite sure who she is. I run to the window, and I look. She's wearing a purple dress, and she is just as beautiful walking away. I made it a point to find out where she worked in the building. This is the old Fort Duquesne building in downtown Pittsburgh. And what I did was, I would time going to lunch every day. I would come up the back steps. Her office was right on the edge. And as she came out her office, I would go, "Hi," and I'd walk away. I found out what seat she sat in the lunchroom. I would go straight to that seat while she got her lunch. And I would fake reading the paper. And she would sit down at the table, and I'd go, "Hi." And after time of saying, "Hi, how you doing? I'm Brian. What's your name?" She married me. The most beautiful thing in the world I've ever seen is my wife.
Joe McBride. What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? Joe McBride.
Mr. Topic Master, fellow Toastmasters, now that is a question. My wife's in the audience. I got to be careful. And I must tell you that I don't know if I'm going to be able to combine myself to one. Because when I think about the most beautiful things I've ever seen, I think of a little baby girl in the hands of a nurse who just minutes after she was born, they brought her into me. And folks, those of you that shared that understand how beautiful not only the sight is, but the experience. And then we turn around and we're very blessed, because if you, like us, drove in here this morning and the sun started coming up with that cloud cover, you had a beautiful sunrise. So the challenge is, to me, not what's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. The challenge is, am I going to be able to recognize and appreciate the next beautiful thing that comes before me? And I'll challenge all of you. Think about the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, and then make sure that you're looking for the beauty in the things you see every day. Mr. Toastmaster.
Our next speaker, Francine Milligan. What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? Francine Milligan.
Mr. Contest Chair, fellow Toastmasters, distinguished Toastmasters, and honored guests. What is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen? Well, that's a no-brainer. It's all of you in this room today. The most beautiful thing I have ever seen is the growth I have seen in my fellow Toastmasters in the 10 years that I've been a member. I have seen people join our clubs that couldn't utter a consistent sentence without stuttering. I have seen people who have looked at the floor when they talked, were afraid to make eye contact, stand up at a conference and run the gauntlet and become DTMs, and who now teach others how to speak. I have seen people go through the program at warp speed and have become district leaders, all because of this organization. The growth that we experience as Toastmasters, as individuals, as friends, that is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Mr. Contestant.
Breen. What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? Breen.
Thank you, Mr. Contest Chair, fellow Toastmasters, and distinguished guests. When I'm asked what is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, many things come to mind, not the least of which is my husband of nearly 20 years, our 3 beautiful children, and the many memories that I have over that time. But perhaps more interesting response is that I love to appreciate nature and beauty in the world. And I love the phenomenon when the sunlight is just coming through the clouds and it looks like it's its own weather event, and it's so beautiful. And I remember having an assignment in college where we had to name an event. It was a creative speaking, creative writing kind of a class. And I remember thinking that I thought about the clouds and the sunlight coming through the clouds and what a remarkable view that is to see when it happens. And I remember naming it the Philippa, after what I thought was at the time was my favorite book in the Bible, because to me, that image of the way the sunlight sometimes comes through the clouds in the sky just, to me, appears to be almost ethereal, almost heavenly. And it's just beautiful and reassuring when I see it, and perhaps it does have a name, but I remember in college giving that specific phenomenon a name and thinking about the comfort that I receive when I see that image, thinking about the heavens, thinking about perhaps loved ones that I may be thinking about as well. And now as an adult, it's an image that is still beautiful and one that I can now share with my own children. Mr. Contest Chair.
What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? Sue Ellis.
Hello, Toastmasters. That is a really easy question. I had the privilege of going to the hospital with my daughter. She was giving birth to my first grandchild. He wasn't a normal birth. He was coming out backwards, like half of our family generally does. He was not only feet first, but butt up, which I guess is not the right way to do it. So I was privileged to go into the delivery room with her because she was so frightened. She was a very young mom, and this was an experience that she really wasn't looking forward to. Of course, what women do. But I remember as they brought this little baby boy into the world, cesarean section, the first thing I saw were 2 little butt cheeks. And that was the most beautiful butt I think I've ever seen. That was shortly followed by 1 leg, then another, and then the rest of him. That's when we discovered that it was a him. And I remember sitting there, because they had me sitting down. They were afraid I was going to, otherwise. So I was sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, this is really life coming into being. It was so wonderful. This was my grandchild. And my daughter's laying there saying, well? I said, well, what? She says, what is it? I said, it's a boy. She goes, yeah. I said, right, that's great. Then they made me leave. And I wanted to see more. Thank you very much, fellow Toastmasters and honored guests.
George Hayward. What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? George Hayward.
Mr. Contest Chair, fellow Toastmasters and guests. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to work as a discussion group facilitator for a class at Penn State called SOCH 300. As part of my facilitation duties, I was trained to go into a room, 18 different students from all different backgrounds, and get them to communicate with one another on an authentic basis. We were trained weekly in this class, and then we went out 3 times a week, and we worked with the group and got them to talk about things that they don't get the chance to talk about on a college campus with other people. It was in this training session, though, that I saw something very beautiful. We had sorority girls, and I had stereotypes in my head. We had fraternity guys, and I had stereotypes in my head. We had black students, white students. We had Indian students. But when we sat down in that room for an hour and a half, once a week, and we talked about whatever was on our hearts, about race, about gender issues, about sexuality issues, I saw people cry and bring up things from their past that they might have never spoken to someone about. I learned that even though someone might be a sorority girl, or a frat guy, or an Indian, or a black, or a white, at the bottom of it, we're just people who would like to talk to other people. And if we're given that opportunity and put in that context, a lot of beautiful things will come out. I don't know if that kind of beauty exists in our everyday world, but for 15 times throughout the course of the semester, I got to see real, palpable emotion and real human lives instead of just the facade that many of us see, especially on a college campus. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. Mr. Congress.
Dana Mitnik. What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? What is one of the most beautiful things you have ever seen? Dana Mitnik.
Thank you, Mr. Contest Chair, fellow Toastmasters, welcome guests. What is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen? Let's go back in time to the year 2010, when I decided to drive to my vacation in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I decided to drive all night long. And the most beautiful thing that I've seen as I was coming into Dallas was the rising of the sun. The rising of the sun is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen because it puts things into perspective for me. It's a new day. It's a new opportunity. It's another chance to have fun. Another chance to enjoy what has been given to us. And I'm very appreciative of that. If you were to ask me if that was to ever change, I would say nothing compares for me, because it's always a reminder of another opportunity. Mr. Contest Chair.
While they're all on stage, one big round of applause. Congratulations. I'd like to present each of the contestants with a certificate of participation. And although we do have some contestants who are competing in later contests, we won't be asking everyone an interview question, but we'll have a couple interview questions as well. Let's start with Rob Viszneki. Rob, I'd like to ask if you remember, it's something I mentioned at the introduction, if you remember your first table topic question, and perhaps you could tell us about your very first club experience or how you felt when you first came up on stage.
I'm not sure about the first table topic question. I mean, they tend to run together over the years. Fairly good, bad. Who the heck came up with that question? But I do remember my Toastmasters experience, and that's why I've rejoined after an absence of 6 years. I wish to start over again and just enjoy the ride.
I'm actually going to ask the same question to all the interviewees. If you remember the first table topic that you answered, or if you remember your very first Toastmaster experience, you could share it with us with 30 seconds to a minute.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. I actually attended a meeting of the BNY Mellon Club in 2010, and the table topics question I had to do something with Punxsutawney Phil and Groundhog Day. And I gave a very creative answer. Needless to say, I won that day's best table topics. And from there, the rest is history. So I go from that initial experience to competing in the district contest. And this has been an amazing experience, and I wouldn't trade it in for anything.
Francine Milligan. Answer to our question.
Thank you, Mr. Contest Chair. After 10 years, it's very difficult to remember my first table topics question. But I do remember my icebreaker speech. In fact, I just regained it at the Next Step Club to restart my competent communication track. But more importantly, I remember my first mentor. Her name was Ann Fish. We worked in the audit department together. And I remember how she helped me learn that you don't have to say everything at one time. You have 40 plus speeches to get everything in that you want to say. She really helped me learn how to pare down what I wanted to say into a very organized speech. And for that is a lesson I learned and have kept with me and will always be grateful. Mr. Contest.
Congratulations on participating in the Table Topics contest. Do you have any memories of your first table topic or the very first meeting you went to?
Actually, I remember them very clearly because I'll date myself. The table topic concerned the fact that gas was getting close to $1.50 a gallon. And I explained it was our own dang fault. Because when we started pumping oil money into the Middle East, and then they started sending their sons to the United States for education, we sent them to Harvard and Yale and the Wharton School of Business, and they went back and did just what we taught them to do. They maximized their profits. And our mistake was not sending them to Texas and Oklahoma and LSU where they party. Because if we'd done it right, the world would have a big party on that oil money. But instead, now what are you paying? $3, We saw 335 all over the place. It's 319 when we left Steubenville. Folks, the more the world changes, the more it stays the same.
Brian Johnson. Brian, do you have any memories of your first table topic?
My first table topic at the club level actually was the contest, and I didn't know it. And I joined in as I walked through the door, and Jim, my mentor, said, "Hey, why don't you get in table topics?" And I said, "Okay." And I won. I was like, hey, thanks, great. And he goes, "Well, we'll see you at the next contest." And I said, "What next contest?" And that led me here today.
Breen. Congratulations. Laura, do you remember your first club meeting or your first table topic?
I think my first club meeting was last year with Sandra Eckler with the Gateway Toastmasters. And I went with her because we were in a meeting together, and she was a member of the club, and I went because I was new to our large financial organization and I had no other friends. So I appreciate her introducing me to Toastmasters and what it's about, and we had a nice meeting that day and have ever since.
Congratulations. Do you remember one of your first meetings or one of your first table topics?
I should, because we just chartered our club July 1st. But I'm old. And I may not even remember your name if it was 15 minutes ago. So I do vaguely remember gaining a reputation in my club for giving the only official striptease talk that has ever been offered. And I just want you all to know ahead of time, I did not take off my clothes. Just wanted to clarify that. But I'm sorry I don't remember, but I really don't.
Thank you very much. George Hayward. Congratulations. George will be competing in one of our other contests. I'd like one more round of applause for all the contestants. Please come and have a seat. Thank you so very much. I would like to welcome up and congratulate our third place winner, Joe McBride. Please stay on stage with us. Our second place winner, Brian Johnson. Our first place winner, George Hayward.